To give your fiction a fighting chance on Royal Road, you need to compete with other authors and find a lane. I'd run out of gas if I always went full speed, so I'm pacing myself. What efforts have I been making, and what insight have I gained about my story? Hop in before I kick it into gear. Are you coming too, Tampy? What a cutie. First off, I'd like to check in with how things are going. Last video I mentioned getting off to a relatively humble start, and I wouldn't say things have turned around completely, but I have seen steady growth. I'm grateful for that. You have to celebrate your wins. Setting realistic expectations is a big part of this process. It's important to keep dreaming big, but it's also critical not to put too much pressure on myself. So I want to take a moment to show appreciation for all the comments, the views, the messages of support. All of that has been wonderful. But rather than speaking abstractly, let's look at some specific numbers. My total views are up to 1,500. That's amazing. I'm getting 108 average views for the 14 chapters I've already released. I also have more followers and comments than the last video. That's a huge win. I'd love a stronger follower conversion rate, but this is a fine foundation. Plenty of room to grow. Anything posted to the internet seems to have this phenomenon. It takes a certain amount of attention to get more attention, a bit of a snowball effect. When very few people are engaging with whatever it is, others are reluctant to be the first. I think another factor is I only have 14 chapters available. In the same time as I started serializing my fiction, other authors might have released 4 times as much content. This is why I mentioned not being able to maintain full speed in the intro. I know myself, and I'm beginning to know myself better as a writer. I just can't write that fast, especially indefinitely. I'd burn out hard. Writing 600 to 1,000 words per day has been working out tremendously for me. Alternatively, I could have written 2 books before I released my first, but I was overeager. I wanted to share. There's also a lot I've learned since releasing my first book that I can apply to my second book. That wouldn't be possible if I waited to build up such a backlog. It does, however, make it harder to compete with the rapid release style of many authors on the platform. The algorithm definitely favors quantity. Maybe someday I'll build up to writing 20,000 words a week, but I'm happy with my current output. One major change I made was restructuring my chapters. Unfortunately, in my dashboard, the order of the chapters is all out of whack now because I had to insert a few. But if you look at the retention between chapters, the numbers are very encouraging. 350 to 179 is a much healthier drop-off than before. And even better, the chapters after that retain about 100 views each. If you look at my fiction page instead of my dashboard, you can see that the chapters are in proper order. So what exactly did I do and why? Initially, my first chapter had 5 POVs, short introductions to the cast. I thought this worked, but I got several notes that it was a little overwhelming. Perhaps in book form, it'd be a bit less jarring, but I could understand some of the apprehension. I addressed this change directly in a note and trimmed the first chapter down to 2 POVs, which is far more palatable. I also divided the second chapter so it also only had 2 POVs. Fortunately, the structure of my book allowed this. Only 2 of the timelines are intertwined at this point, so I could go from Esker's introduction into Guillaume's, and then immediately into Esker's second chapter. For the third chapter, I combined Owen's first and second chapters into one, and then did the same in chapter 4 with Liaden. By chapter 5, everything is back to normal. So I avoided extensive rewrites, and I think I helped the beginning of my novel quite a bit. The retention numbers help reinforce that theory. This is why critique groups and sharing your work with readers can be so valuable. Outside perspectives can help you refine your story. Now onto shoutouts, the cheapest and one of the most effective ways to get traffic on Royal Road. The author notes at the beginning and end of chapters are an opportunity to promote other works. Here's an example from chapter 6 of my series. My accruit and I agreed to a shoutout swap. I shout out their book, they shout out mine. Here's what it looks like. And then you get into the chapter. Alternatively, I could put this shout out at the end of the chapter. So how did I make this happen? Did I find this image, write all this text? Absolutely not. I got a shout out code from the author. What is a shout out code, you ask? It takes your blurb and cover art and presents it in a form that other authors can paste into their notes. Finite Void made a free-to-use tool that's amazing for this purpose. Thank you so much. Since I'm a goof, coding does not come natural. All you have to do is navigate to the main page of your fiction, copy that URL, paste it into this field, generate this string of code, and there's the results. Pretty cool, right? The important part is you copy this code, and most people will create a Google Doc where you can share it with others. Here's a quick guide for implementing another author's code, which I didn't find very intuitive. Draft your chapter, pick either the pre or post author note, copy the code, click this icon, and post the code into it. If you have a smaller window in your browser, you may need to click the little ellipses button to see this icon. You can even add a customized note before or after the shoutout. And there you have it. Once you have your code ready, the next important part is finding people to shout out with. You can do so through direct messages, writing reviews, finding people on Reddit, or using Discord communities. Author servers will generally have a channel dedicated to finding shoutouts. I met a fellow author on Reddit who got me into this server, and we also agreed to a shoutout swap. Royal Road Writers Guild also has a shoutout channel. The key then becomes finding authors with a lot of reach and exposure to promote your book. Ideally, you'd want to share a similar audience, but I think raw numbers are going to favor you more than trying to find someone with the exact same kind of book. When you're hobnobbing and networking, how do you keep track of all the people you've agreed to shout out or who've agreed to shout you out? One of the author YouTubers I connected with, Paul Toddkill, recommended creating a Google Doc. I'm sure I could organize this better, but I have a column of my obligations and a column for authors who have agreed to shout me out. So far, 5 people have shouted me out, and I have 4 more roughly scheduled. But I need to get busy securing more. I want to thank Maya Crute, MR Castilla, Tavern Teller, LDJ Writes, and Soul of Choco for giving me shoutouts. In case you forgot, I'm a goof. I hadn't used Discord in a while and was unfamiliar with the interface. I missed a few shoutouts because I didn't notice the notifications for some direct messages in the top left. I won't make that mistake again. In other news, I've been getting acupuncture for my knee, and my doctor happens to be a huge web novel fan. He's been into them for over a decade and is a voracious reader. I think he's the first person I met face-to-face who's into web fiction. It was a lot of fun to connect to him on this topic. On one of the author Discord servers I joined, Hidden Gems, I introduced myself. I had a nice chat with several other writers and met Aidan Marquis. He's had a lot of success releasing a multi-POV series that's somewhat similar to mine. And he was kind enough to answer some of my questions about how best to promote this kind of work. The blurb and what to expect sections of his series are a great template for me to look at. And hey, look at that. He's also releasing twice a week. And as you can see, he has a wonderful response to his story. One of the major differences is he was a bit more prepared in his release schedule. In his first month, it looks like he released around 27 chapters. That's almost twice what I did. And I think that contributed greatly to his rapid growth. When I asked Aidan if he was willing to shout me out, unfortunately he planned ahead and has all his shoutouts booked. However, he did suggest that I very politely reach out to this much bigger author. David has 6,800 followers. That's incredible. And when I looked at one of his latest chapters, I proved to myself how effective shoutouts can be.
Irish as well, correctly. Too hot, dedanen.
Too hot, dedanen. The Too Hot Dedanen are a major part of Irish folklore and feature prominently in this multi-POV story. The setting of my book is inspired by the Norman conquest of Ireland, so this is a wonderful author for me to connect with. Michael Gorman also happens to be an incredible writer, so it's easy to enjoy his work. I wrote a comment asking him a few questions about why he chose this setting and time period, and he was gracious enough to reply in detail. This is one of the features I enjoy so much about Royal Road. The platform facilitates this kind of connection. Already, I had the opportunity to have a meaningful exchange with this author. I find that very inspiring. All said and done, while my growth could have been a bit stronger, I'm trending in the right direction, and that's what matters. I still have plenty of time to get on the Rising Star list. To do so, I need to trigger explosive growth. And to achieve that, I'll set up more shoutouts, refine my blurb, and set up an ad campaign. I'm looking forward to checking in next video to share my progress. But right now, let me check in with Tampy.
Who's a sweet girl?